Yo, what's going on, snipers, and welcome to our finale of our Winnipeg Jets franchise mode here in NHL 24. So it's a little bit of a bittersweet day. Obviously, today I'm recording this, which is Friday. NHL 25 news dropped, which is very, very exciting on franchise mode. I actually do have a straw poll link I will put in the description so you guys could go vote on what we do for our first normal franchise mode of NHL 25. But anyways, aside from that, it is a bittersweet day because obviously this is the last episode of the series. In this video, we're going to be basically looking through all of our players' career stats and seeing how good they did. We'll try and find some former players as well and see how good their careers have panned out after leaving our team. We'll also take a look at like the record book and basically just wrap up this franchise mode altogether. It kind of sucks that we weren't able to get all the way to the end of this franchise mode in a way, but I think this was a very successful franchise mode. We had a nice lot of cup wins, which obviously I think this might be my most decorated cup winning franchise mode since I'd like to say NHL 17 when I had like a Canucks series. So we won a lot of Stanley Cups, won a lot of President's Trophies. We had a lot of great players as well. Aiden Irving being the one that most recently retired. So it'll be interesting to look at our other players' career stats and also see like the record book to see who led us in career all-time penalty minutes, that type of thing. Like I feel like Aiden Irving is going to be a lot of the records that we have, but should be interesting to look at those type of things nonetheless. But anyways, before we get into looking at all that, let's get into our last and final comment of the series, which is from Saturn Otaku. He says, certainly not the way you wanted to end it, but still you can't call this franchise mode anything other than a resounding success. I didn't realize there was no Channel Hall of Fame video from last year, so not a big deal if you decide not to make one this time around. I hope you indeed will replace these videos with more Nashville throwback content until NHL 25. And yeah, basically this series, since it is technically ending on the Saturday, I think I will be probably posting back-to-back days of Nashville videos on like the Monday and Tuesday. So basically instead of, not Monday and Tuesday, actually Monday and the Wednesday, because that way the Jets episode will get replaced. That's supposed to be on the Wednesday by the Nashville episode. Now, if we get far in the playoffs, the only thing is NHL 25 is literally right around the corner. So I honestly don't know what it is going to look like in terms of wrapping that series up, but hopefully we could get it wrapped up nicely before NHL 25 officially drops, and then we can get right into doing a Draft to Glory franchise mode, which will be exciting. I do have an idea for a team, not necessarily the jersey concept and stuff yet, but I do have an idea for what the team's going to be, which is exciting. And then I don't really know exactly who I'm going to do yet for my actual normal franchise mode, but like I said, I made a straw poll, so you guys can go vote on that, and we will actually decide on what we want to do in that sense. But anyways, let's wrap up this series. We'll start by taking a look at our players' career stats and then trying to find some old former players, probably as well, like Jaquezie, Eberle, those type of guys, if they're still kicking around, which I'm pretty sure they are. Then after that, I think is when we'll go to the record book, take a look at stats for like record books for around the entire league aside from our team. We'll take a look at the NHL record book, and then we'll look at our records ourselves. And then that'll probably be pretty much it at that point, I think, and wrapping the series up. But let's take a look at our players and their career numbers. We'll start with our team, of course, and then, like I said, we'll try and see who else is still out there in the NHL. So actually, should we go through the contract screen instead? Because I feel like it might send some people down and all that. Yeah, let's go through the contract screen instead. So that way we could actually take a look at guys that are in the AHL that might have played in our NHL team as well. So we could kind of get like a gist for every single player on our roster. So let's see what we got here. So we'll start off with the goaltenders because might as well do that. So starting off with Ivan Kalinin. He has not had a long career here. Former 4th round pick of ours in 2036. So a total of 7 years back. Not, like I said, a long career, 3 NHL seasons, 2 AHL seasons, but a pretty solid goaltender, I would say. Regular season, his numbers aren't the best. You can see like a career 898, which on a team like ours should be a lot better. But his playoff numbers have been actually really good. Like, I think this guy would have been a pretty good playoff goaltender to run for many years to come. As you can see, his first year, obviously having a 934 is pretty nice. Jumps up to a 913, or well, not jumping up, I guess, technically falling back a bit, but more games played. Then this last year, he played 14 games, had a 908, so he was really not that bad. His goals against in the last season was a little high, but I would say he was definitely a better playoff goalie than he was in the regular season. And then, yeah, his preseason numbers, he had a 916 save percentage, so he was really good in those games, but those games don't really matter at all. And yeah, who knows how much he would have requested from us this offseason, but he would have probably, I'd say I would probably have re-signed him just because Bearable wouldn't have been ready yet. Lynch isn't ready yet. So I think obviously Cleanan would have probably came back in for another season here in Winnipeg. Dagenais doesn't really matter too much because we literally just signed him for one season, but he only played the 21 games with us as a backup. Didn't really do too bad. Did get to play a little bit in the playoffs as well, but yeah, not the best backup goalie in the world, but who knows, maybe this guy would have been better next season as a backup. It really depends, I guess, on our defensive core in front of him, but yeah, he doesn't really matter at all. Aside from that, we have some pretty interesting players here on the defensive side of things. We'll start on the bottom of this list, I guess. Moreau's never played an NHL game with us yet, but he definitely would have made it, I'd say, next season. He only played one AHL year, 36 points, not too bad. And yeah, he probably would have taken over the defensive spot for, I'd like to say, somebody on the top six pairing, maybe. Somebody like Kopecky might have gotten dealt. I don't know exactly what I would have done. Maybe I would have just let go Crest to free agency. But yeah, Moreau's was definitely on the cusp of making our NHL team by the end of this franchise mode. Then we have young Peter Kopecky, former 26th overall pick. Only the one season with us in the NHL, 70 games played and 11 points. Not really that bad. We didn't play him that much in the playoffs, so he only played the one game. But yeah, he had some pretty good AHL numbers. Like his last season in the AHL was pretty promising. 42 points, plus 44, 113 penalty minutes. Like, this guy's pretty aggressive for a two-way defenseman, but I think he definitely could have been an impact player if he would have developed a little bit earlier, because being 24 years old already, I don't think he grows much more than that. Then we have Gustafsson, Mr. Kalle Gustafsson, former second-round pick, here on defensive defenseman, and he was a very good shutdown defender for us in the playoffs. Regular season was -1 with 13 points, which isn't too bad, but you can see in the playoffs, 3 assists in 14 games and was plus 13. He was really good on that pairing with Fawcett and locked down a lot of things. So yeah, Kalle Gustafsson might have been a pretty good defender coming up. Maybe he would have been into our top 4 at some point. Then we have an interesting one here. Caden DePenta, former 4th-round pick of ours at the pick of 123. He started developing a little bit late into his career, but I would say from an offensive standpoint, this guy is relatively promising. First season he plays in the NHL, he picks up 20 points in 49 games. Year after, it's 43 points in 76 games, and this year 31 points in 52 games because he was alternated between a healthy scratch and not. But he definitely was a good little offensive option behind Vandermeer, I'd say. 94 career points at this point in time. And in playoffs, he had 15 points in 30 games. Like, he definitely could bring up some points in the postseason, which is nice. I do think he probably would have tested free agency in this offseason because his asking price was so high. But if we would have freed up the cap space, I would have probably been able to see if I could try and hold on to him. But to be honest, I don't know if it would have been necessary because Vandermeer is probably the best defenseman this team ever had, really, in this franchise mode. Aside from that, we also have Bjorn Backer, good little defensive defenseman, former 2nd-round pick back in 2032, so 11 seasons ago. His entire career here in Winnipeg, plus 210. He was playing alongside Vandermeer a lot, so that's probably why the plus-minus is so good. But 104 career points in the regular season, 16 points in the playoffs, which isn't too bad. His shooting percentage actually goes up from regular season to playoffs, so that's pretty good. But yeah, shout out to Bjorn Backer. Like I said, good little shutdown defenseman. He is locked up for a few more years, so he would have been here right till pretty much near the end of his career at this point in time. Then we have young Fawcett, who only just played one season. He was a 21st overall pick in 2039, another offensive defenseman, but I would say definitely not super offensive in the NHL, more of a two-way defender. 9 points, 42 games, plus 11 is really solid. And in the playoffs, like I was mentioning, he was also great plus-minus with Kalle Gustafsson. Plus 9 was 6 points. So his offense definitely improved in the playoffs. So I definitely think this guy would have been a top 4 defenseman for us next season. And yeah, he looks like he could end up being something pretty good because look at his offensive awareness at 87. Really good passing. I think he definitely could have become a good player for us to replace somebody like DePenta in that top 4. Then we have Sasha Kress, who was originally drafted by the Dallas Stars 6th overall in 2033, so just a decade ago. He originally had elite potential, but he didn't develop into that. He's only played 3 years here with our team, but he's been a pretty solid defenseman, not as good offensively as I was hoping for when I brought him in, but some really good plus-minus stats. And then in the playoffs, he hasn't really done too much, so he was not the best in the postseason. But I would say from a regular season playing next to somebody like Vandermeer, he was a very solid defender and also could bring up some points if he needed. And then the big one here, I would say this guy was probably in line to take the captaincy considering Aiden Irving had just retired. Will Vandermeer has had a fantastic career, former 4th overall pick in 2029, so he was drafted quite a while ago at this point in time, 32 years old already, but he's had one of the best careers, I think, from any defenseman I've ever drafted. 837 career points in 1,145 games. Yeah, that might be the best defenseman I've ever drafted easily with those type of numbers. But Vandermeer had a great career. It started off a little bit on the slower front, 32 points. As a rookie defenseman, isn't actually that bad to be honest, but jumps up to 37, jumps to 44. Then he starts to find himself with 64 points, 48 points. Like you could see him start to pick up 50 to 60 points. Breaks out for 81 points, 80 points. Like relatively consistent for the last like 10 plus seasons, which is awesome. Also, being a plus 438 is probably one of the best I've seen from an offensive defenseman. So he picked up a lot of points on the power play, but a lot of regular strength points too. Like only 142 power play points. That means still he had probably close to 700 regular strength points, which is pretty amazing. And then from a short-handed perspective, he had 22 short-handed points. So was very helpful on the PK as well as an offensive defenseman. So was very impressed with Will Vandermeer in the series. He did win, I think, a total of 3 Norrises. Obviously, if this is NHL 25, I'd be able to tell how much he's won. But I think, if I remember right, he's won like 3 Norris trophies in this franchise mode. And then in terms of playoff stats, also a great playoff performer. We've seen some, when we watch like some of the games, he made some really standout defensive plays with his stick. Also helped out offensively. Like this guy just did pretty much everything you'd asked of him. 139 playoff points in 203 games is fantastic for a defender. And you can see one of these years he had 24 points in our cup run, which is amazing. He was there for, I believe, every single one of our Stanley Cup wins. You could see 2031, I believe that was a cup win. Same with 34, 35. I don't remember 35, 36 was, but I know 36, 37, 37, 38 might have been. So he was there for a lot of playoff games, and he did really well in every single one of them, I would say. So shout out to Will Vandermeer, who would have probably went on to play for at least another 4 seasons, I would say. Like, he should be pretty much locked up here until he retires, if he isn't already. We'll try and get through the rest of these kind of players kind of quick because I don't want this video to be too long for you guys, but at the same time, I guess we got to do it justice. So Mark Bulbrook, this guy was acquired from the Pittsburgh Penguins, was he? Or yeah, I think he was acquired from Pittsburgh, but he developed into being actually a pretty good sniper. Former 7th overall pick a decade ago. And you can see his last 2 seasons with us, like very solid stats, like 89 points and 81 points, 78 points the year before. Before that, he was more of like a 40, 50 point guy, but he definitely has started to ramp up his pace quite a bit. And I was very happy when we brought him in. Looks like we actually brought him in from Arizona, so he must have got dealt from Pittsburgh to Arizona. And then I don't remember what we gave up to get him, but Bulbrook definitely developed in the right way. His playoff stats also pretty good, especially the last season. 17 points, 14 games. And then, yeah, just in general, 68 points in 99 career playoff games. Also there for a couple cup wins. So, shout out to Mark Bulbrook. I think he was a great little addition. I don't know if he would have been coming back next season because he is a pending free agent and probably asking for a ton of money. Next up, we got Timo Kavusari, former 2nd-round pick in 2035. This guy's really started to develop into being a very good premier passer, kind of like a Nick Backstrom on the wing in a way, because you can see his first season, he had 35 assists, which is already really good. But 49 assists, jumps to 84 assists in a season, which might be almost close to an NHL record if I'm not mistaken. Probably not actually with Wayne Gretzky and all that, but then you can see 56 assists this season. So his assists have just been always great. He doesn't take a ton of shots, but he had 25 career goals and 224 assists. In the playoffs, he's also been pretty good, 31 points in 38 games. This last playoff run, he didn't score a single goal through 14 games, but he did have 17 assists. So you could definitely see he's definitely more of a pure-on passer, but I think this guy was kind of like a perfect player to put next to a good shooter. So I think he definitely would have had a good time here in his remaining seasons. Then we get to Bryson Waters, who was a former 6th-round pick of ours. I wouldn't say he's a hugely fantastic player, but he has been really useful in that bottom 6. As you can see, he's averaged around 40 points a season, which is pretty good. Also had that type of numbers in the AHL. And then in the playoffs this year, actually, was pretty solid. 10 points in 14 games with 6 goals. So he definitely broke out a little bit this year, and I definitely think he was on the uprise on this roster. There was a little bit of questionable play with his physicality. Like, I believe he probably, based on those penalty minutes in the playoffs, he probably had at least a couple fights. So he was maybe a little bit too aggressive, but I definitely think he was a good, useful player for that bottom six. On the left wing side of things, let's go to the bottom of this list first. Leclerc hasn't made the NHL yet, but he definitely would have been on the cusp of making it, coming off a 71-point season in the AHL, 4 points in the 4 playoff games. I definitely think this guy probably would have been on a roster next season to potentially replace somebody if we decided to move away from a player on a roster. Not sure who we would have moved away, but Leclerc definitely would have been getting close to being NHL ready. Then we have Matthew Harrison, who is still listed as a depth forward. He hasn't really developed, but he's been a useful player as a former 14th overall pick of ours. Some solid numbers. This season, he didn't really get much ice time, so he only had 24 points. But the years before that, like 42 and 55 points, like he could definitely bring the offense if needed, which is nice to see. So 150 career points for him through 328 games. And then in the playoffs, also some solid numbers, 12 points in 36 games. So that's like 1 point every 3 games, which isn't really that bad for a guy only getting 9 minutes and 43 seconds a game, basically. So there's that. Then we have Mr. Keith Bohms. This guy is the only grinder on our team, if I'm not mistaken, former second-round pick 5 years ago. And he's been kind of an intriguing player as well. Not the best in terms of defense as of last season, or this prior season, I should say. But yeah, pretty solid offensive numbers for a grinder, to be honest, like especially in the bottom six type of role. He's shooting 14%, so he doesn't take a lot of shots, but he does score occasionally on his shots. And in the playoffs, 9 points in 31 games really isn't that bad. He has not scored a playoff goal yet in 31 games, though. But yeah, he's been okay. And he, as a grinder, he really doesn't take that much amount of penalty minutes, so at least he was a little bit more reserved in terms of that. But definitely a solid player. I definitely think he could have leaned more towards being a power forward if he would have got his shot power up there and his shot better. But he was kind of more of a power forward guy than a grinder, in my opinion. Then we also have Mr. Taylor Blunden. This guy was a fantastic steal at 4th round, 128th overall, just almost 10 years ago, so 9 years ago, basically. He's starting to find his own game quite a bit as well. As you can see, after a few years in the AHL, his first season, 52 points, which is pretty good. I don't remember if he won the Calder that year or not, but if he did, shout out to him. Then he had 63 points, 69 points, 89 points in a 50-goal season, which kind of came out of nowhere after the year before. Then he picks up 77 points in 82 games, so he's still developing into being a pretty solid player. His playoff numbers are also great, 54 points in 63 games. I definitely think Taylor Blunden was on the right trajectory to being a very solid sniper for us. And also making only $5.1 million, he was very useful for his amount of money he was making. And then we get to the franchise guy who's only played a few seasons with us so far, Brian Marsh. I wish we would have been able to see this guy's career pan out. He's only played 2 years here, but he's already had back-to-back 80-point seasons. He's had 45 goals and 51 goals. Like, he's already been a really solid player. Definitely the type of guy I was looking for to replace Aiden Irving, which is great to see. And then in terms of the playoffs, obviously 19 points in 28 games. Not doing as much in the playoffs, but obviously that was more based on his first playoff run. His last playoff run, which was this season, was actually pretty solid. So very impressed with his play. Also, he has picked up shorthanded goals a lot already too. So he's already been a useful player on both power play, the shorthanded unit, and regular strength. So shout out to Brian Marsh, who will probably end up, I would say he'd probably end up, obviously, the rest of his career in Winnipeg, but obviously he's probably going to cost a ton of money once that ELC decides to come to an end. Then we head to centers. We have Ludvig Ekholm, who has been one of the best players in the series, I would say, as well, kind of. He was the 8th overall pick in 2034, so a solid steal for that position 9 years ago at this point, which is kind of insane. He's developed really well. He's had some great seasons, over 100 points. He's already got 672 points through 568 games as well, so well over point per game. And his career started off on a pretty good note with 85 points in his rookie season. The reason why he did so good was because we kind of let him play as like an 83 overall. I believe it was in the AHL this season. And then he jumped to the NHL, and he was already almost like a second-line forward at that point. And yeah, he was basically the perfect replacement when we had to let go of, who was it? But somebody in our top 6. I know there was somebody that we basically... Oh, it might have been Michael Misa. Yeah, I think he was the Michael Misa replacement. As I think to get Ekholm in, I had to make a tough decision, and that was to get rid of Michael Misa. So, yeah, Ludvig Ekholm came in, and he was actually really, really solid in his first season, and just continued to build on that for the rest of his career up to this point. So just picked up his first Art Ross trophy and some, I think, the Hart as well. And I think there was one other award, if I'm not mistaken. But he's developed into a really good player, and obviously he will be useful for years to come. Already 27 years old, but some great numbers. 97 points also in the playoffs, so he did not slow down in the postseason as well. And I believe he was there for at least 2 cup wins, which is nice. So shout out to Ludwig Ekholm. Still there for at least 3 more seasons. I probably would have definitely tried to re-sign that guy as much as possible, though. And then we get into another long-term Winnipeg Jets guy. He was pending UFA, so I would have tried to keep him onto him for sure, but I don't know if he would have asked for too much. Jerry Bickle. This guy might be the most remarkable story of this franchise mode, as he was drafted 215th overall in 2028, so I believe that might be considered the last pick of the draft, or one of the last picks of the draft. But he has developed into being a way better player than expected. 768 career points in 816 games. A lot of 70, 80-point seasons playing next to guys like Chikwueze and all that. Like, he definitely came into the NHL on a really good stinger. Like, had some really good AHL years. 53 points in his rookie season. I think he won the Calder too that year, but I honestly do not remember. But yeah, since then, yeah, like I said, he's just been a very consistent player. And also his playoff numbers too, like 100 career assists in the playoffs through 159 games, 145 points. Like, he did not slow down, and I think this guy definitely could have been a future captain of this team as well if we decided not to go to Vandermeer. But for where he was drafted, this guy was probably one of the best deals I've ever had in a franchise mode. Then we get into the bottom 6 a little bit. We have a couple guys that have only played a few years. Calle Holmquist, former second-round pick only 6 seasons ago. He's been an interesting player so far. I think he's developing the right way. Had 20 points in his first 30 games, which is fantastic. 42 points this year with 22 goals. So I think he definitely could have been a useful player if the series was to go longer. His playoff numbers a little bit slacking off this last season with 4 points only, and only the 1 goal to show for it. But 12 points, 28 games, not really that bad. But yeah, I definitely think he could have developed into being something. I don't know why he's listed as a second line for it as an 83, but I probably would have held on to him more as a third line option, because obviously I don't think I would have tried to let go of Bickle. And then the last and final player we take a look on our NHL roster is Warren Wynarski, former 18th overall pick. We had a different Wynarski on this team who actually might be still out there around the league, so we'll definitely take a look and see if he is. But shout out to Warren Wynarski, 3 seasons, pretty consistent points, 25 or so points a season, which is not too bad. A little bit more on the aggressive side of things, but he is more of a defensive forward, so helped us out on the PK with 5 shorthanded points as well throughout his career. And in his playoff numbers, actually have been pretty good considering regular season. He's not a huge point guy. 15 points through 32 career playoff games. A little bit aggressive with 29 penalty minutes, but it's not really that bad. So shout out to Warren Wynarski for making our bottom 6 a little bit more better in terms of the defensive plays. So there's our NHL team. If we go to in the system, we could briefly look at some of these other guys here because some of them matter maybe a bit. We brought in Caleb McNeely. He only played 3 games with us in the playoff run, but 2 assists, so he at least was a bit useful. I honestly don't know what that guy would have done with us next season. He probably would have been let go to free agency likely. These other guys never, I believe, played any games with us. Seth Baker played 7 games with 2 points. Still really didn't develop, unfortunately, for a late first-round pick in 2034. Prosser and Corbett never got to play. Pretty much all these other guys were getting close on the cusp. Like McDermott was close to the NHL, same with Heinen, and Zajac didn't even get to play games at depth forward for us, though. But we definitely had prospects in the system that were getting closer to the NHL. Zachary Clarkson, I believe, played a few games with us, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 30 games with us last season, and then was relegated to the AHL just because we had too much defenders on our team. But yeah, he was an enforcer, so he had 106 penalty minutes in the AHL last season. And I'm kind of glad we didn't decide to play him in the NHL just because I feel like he could have been a little bit of a liability with the amount of penalty minutes he was taking. So I don't know how long this guy would have been with the team. Probably a free agent in the offseason just to kind of clear up our defensive core a bit, but shout out to him. The rest of these guys, I believe, never played, but we do have guys like Jackson who were on the cusp of making it, so at least, yeah, more good prospects. And then our goalies in the system, none of these guys got to play in the NHL yet. Phillips, unfortunately, has not really developed at all, which kind of sucks because this guy started off as a high overall, but he just didn't develop. But would have been interesting to see if Barabel or Lynch would have made the NHL in a few seasons. And then, yeah, those are the unsigned prospects that never got to play a single game in our organization by the end of this franchise mode. So there's that. Now the question is, how am I going to find these former players? Let's actually just go through each team. Maybe I could do this a little bit easier. Like look at forwards quickly and then look at defenders. But let's see if any former players are still kicking around. So I believe this is our former Eberle, right? Yes, it is. So Quinton Eberle is in Anaheim. So that's where he is currently. He's 33 years old now at this point, which is kind of crazy. He did play a lot of seasons in Boston, was recently dealt to Anaheim. 17 points in his last 20 games is pretty remarkable for a 33-year-old. But Eberle, really underrated player, to be honest, in this series. Very good point production with us, like 63 points 1 year, 40-something. Also had good playoff numbers, if I remember right, too. But 577 points in his career is a pretty good player. That playoff stats, you can see 80 points in 119 career playoff games, but most of them were when we were winning Stanley Cups. Like he had 19 points 1 year, 17 points another year, 17 points another year there. I believe he was there for 3 of our Cup wins based on that. But you can see definitely he hasn't been as good since leaving us, but still, he was a very useful player for this team. Former 6th round pick as well. Like, you can't ask much more of a guy that was drafted 183rd overall. So shout out to Quinton Eberle. Anybody else that I recognize on the Ducks here? Nobody on forwards. Anybody on defense? No. Actually, I do. Yes, Pierce Bishop. I almost forgot about Pierce Bishop. Former 2nd round pick. We could briefly look into Pierce Bishop here. He had some interesting years, I would say. Obviously didn't get a huge opportunity with us, but after leaving us, kind of a solid defenseman. 38 points 1 year with the Rangers. Yeah, he actually did okay with some other teams. I don't know if he won a Stanley Cup. He must have won a cup with the Ducks a few years back, because I think they did win a cup at one point. But yeah, Pierce Bishop really didn't develop into much for us, but he's making $6.5 million now, so at least he's getting paid by another team. So there is the Ducks former players that used to play for us. I'm not going to look at the AHL because there's probably not going to be anybody important. Maximus Nash really doesn't matter too much, but he was our backup for 1 season. And got to play some playoff games, but wasn't super good. But shout out to Maximus Nash. What else we got here? Nobody on defense. What about forwards? Trying to see if there's any former guys I remember. I feel like there's not a lot of them left in the league, but there is definitely a few. Like, here's another one. None other than Ludwig Enroth. Oh boy. Former 4th round pick of ours. Enroth was another intriguing player, but I had to move on from him just because of the roster, how it was set up. But he played a few years in Boston as well. The one thing that kind of is a little bit weird is after we dealt him to Arizona, he signed basically with the Edmonton Oilers in free agency. And then you can see that Edmonton dealt him to Boston, and he was relegated to the AHL because AI is dumb sometimes. But afterwards, then he played a lot more seasons in Boston and has been actually a pretty consistent 30-goal scorer. So Ludwig Enroth still had a pretty good career after leaving us, I would say. 654 career points. 869 games. Not the best playoff performer. 37.67 games. Like, that's good. 26 goals, but his playoff numbers definitely not as good as his regular season ones, I would say. But, yeah, he was there for 2 Stanley Cup wins, and he was a big piece to the team with, like, guys like Eberle on, I believe, our 3rd line, if I remember right. Does Boston have anybody else that I remember? If I end up skipping over anybody, you guys can let me know. Jamal Hurd, we could shout out to Jamal Hurd, former 4th line guy. Only played a little bit with us. You can see 2 seasons. Sinston hasn't really played much. He was playing in the AHL for Providence last season. He's been an okay player. So shout out to Jamal Hurd, former 2nd rounder. Any defenders in Boston, or did I already look at that? I don't think I did. Buffalo. What else we got here? Looking for former guys. Anybody that wants to make their name known. Shout out to this Ferrata guy doing Buffalo. This guy lost to us 2 times in the Cup Finals. Almost point per game in his career, too. I don't remember if Buffalo won a cup. I think they did at one point, so he might have 1 cup. But I know that we did beat him 2 times in the finals. And he's still in Buffalo, which is kind of insane. Let's see. Anybody that I recognize, though, that used to play with us. I recognize Mason's name, but I don't know why. Probably, I guess, from Tampa. Let's see. Don't see anybody else there. Did I already look at defense? I feel like I did. Yes, I did. Okay. Got to double check, though. Shout out to Mills, who knocked us out in the conference finals, losing in the Stanley Cup finals. But, yeah, Mills, kind of just a normal goalie. Nothing huge, but we had him for a little bit. Then we had to move on from him because we had another goalie coming up, I believe, or we just wanted to make our goalies a little bit more balanced, having a starter and a backup rather than having two starters. Defensively, I don't think the Flames had anybody here because we just played them in the playoffs. If I'm not mistaken, yeah, there was nobody there. Okay, let's head to Carolina. Anybody in Carolina that used to play? Oh yeah, Philip Groshek, of course. Another guy that had a really good career with us, 34 years old at this point. He is on the decline quite a bit. Former 22nd overall pick. He was another guy I wasn't really wanting to move on from because you could see 83, 84. Like, he was a really good player with us. But I had to move on from him once again because Aiden Irving took priority and all that. Did really good in Carolina as well, though. Had like a 97-point year. Had some 80-point seasons. Over 1,000 points in his career, which is really respectable. And in his playoff numbers as well, like, he was close to point per game. Like, even after leaving us, he had a point per game playoffs in Carolina, and one that he was under point per game just last season. So, in general, Philip Groshek was probably one of the more underrated players in this series, I would say. And that's it for their forwards. What about defenders? Oh, Louis Vara. Shout out to Tony Louis Vara, who's playing with them. Louis Vara has been a bit of a journeyman since leaving us. We did bring him back, I think, at one point. No, we were thinking about it. But after he left us, he went to Boston, Minnesota, St. Louis. What else? We went to Detroit, Carolina. Like, he's been quite a bit of places in the United States. But shout out to him. Solid DFD. Nothing insane, but definitely a good player. He's more of a two-way according to this, but I felt like he was more of a DFD with us, if I'm not mistaken. So shout out to Louis Vara. Goalies, nobody there. We head to Chicago, and Logan Scarlett, another guy that was with us for a good amount of time, won a Stanley Cup or two with us, and then we had to move him on from him. He's been in Chicago ever since, which is kind of impressive that he stayed with them as long as he has, but long career, pretty solid numbers. But his numbers with us in his only 2 seasons were pretty good. I didn't realize he only played with us for 2 years. It felt like a lot longer than 2 years. Damn, so he's more of a Chicago Blackhawks legend at this point. Wow, okay. Yeah, I thought he played a lot more seasons with us, but still had some pretty good seasons in Chicago. And his playoff numbers were relatively respectable. Obviously, there were some times, though, where I think this game, or this series in 2038, was because we destroyed him. At 788 save percentage, I think he was in net for that series, if I remember right, because we did play him a couple times in the postseason. And he was drafted 2nd round, which is not too bad. Aside from that, anybody else in Chicago? Anybody else that I remember? Not that I recognize here. Okay, we'll head to Colorado here. I'll try and go through this a little bit quicker because I know this video is already like 33 minutes and we still have to look through record book stuff, but this isn't our former Scarlet. It's a different one because I know we had 2 Scarlets. The other one was a defender, that's right. I believe he's still kicking around somewhere. Defensively, what do we got here? Oh, Blum used to actually technically play with us. He's making $16 million now, but he had a little bit of a time here with 29 points. After leaving us, he's been actually really good in Colorado, but has not had a Stanley Cup to show for it. So shout out to Troy Blum, who was a work in progress with us. Nobody there in goal, but I do remember Gavin Curry from the Ducks, if I'm not mistaken, or Yote, something like that. Columbus. Hey, is that Mika Puka? What's his name? Yeah, Mika Puka. I do remember that name, too. Hey, shout out to Laura Kynan. This is a really interesting one, because I didn't sign this guy, even though we drafted him, and then he went on to be a good player. Or a solid goalie, I should say. Not a great goaltender by any stretch, but he went on to play some seasons in Washington, then into Columbus, but he never played in our organization because he was like 22 years old in medium elite or something like that, and I was like, I don't know if he's going to be really much of anything. So I let him go, and he ended up being a pretty solid goalie in Columbus in the playoffs, at least in 2038, but other than that, kind of more of a mid-goaltender than anything else. Anybody else? This was our former Baldwin, right? Yeah, I don't really remember Dawson Baldwin too much. I don't think he really played in our NHL team. Yeah, I know he didn't. He played 2 years in the AHL. We let him go for reasons just to make more roster room, I guess. And then he played in Columbus, had a respectable career. Yeah, not too bad, but I honestly don't remember him that much. No offense to him. In terms of forwards, Julian Fairchild. This guy's an interesting one as well. We drafted him 21st overall. He had a pretty good career after leaving us. We dealt him to Colorado? No, we dealt him to Arizona. Yeah, we dealt him to Arizona. And then he went to play there for a little bit. Didn't sign in Colorado and has definitely found himself late into his career, which I wasn't really expecting. Had a brief stint in the AHL in Columbus, probably when they traded him. Colorado traded him, which is kind of ridiculous. But yeah, he's been good. 60 assists last season, and in the playoffs, he's also been a pretty solid player too. So yeah, Julian Fairchild is probably one of the better late bloomer players that used to play for us. And speaking of late bloomers, I almost forgot about this dude too. Edwin Matsumoto. Yeah, Edwin Matsumoto. Brief career with us, but he's getting paid. He's actually had really good seasons too. So some of these guys actually went on to have good careers after leaving us, which kind of surprises me. Because Matsumoto for us had 2 years, 27, 30-something points. We dealt him away because we needed to free up more roster space again. And afterwards, I mean, yeah, he was dominant in Columbus. Playoff numbers as well were pretty good. So shout out to Edwin Matsumoto. And I know he's getting paid a ton of money, but he actually was respectable for that type of money. So shout out to Columbus. We head to the Dallas Stars. Anybody that used to play with us there. Akeem Hansen. Man, there's so many guys that I completely forgot about. Hansen's played 3 years in Dallas. Had a 65-point season. Wow, I was not expecting that. Dallas hasn't been a good team, though. You can see based on the plus minus. But Akeem Hansen has been a bright spot in Dallas. And yeah, never played in the playoffs after leaving us. So shout out to him. Former first-round pick. Wow, yeah, a lot of these guys I almost completely forgot about. So it's really nice to actually see where they ended up and how they've done since leaving us. We head to Detroit. Anybody here? Seems like every team at least has one former guy that used to play with us. Jokela. This wasn't our former Jokela, was it? No. The other Jokela was the one that retired. I was looking for the one that we used to play for Nashville, I think. If I remember right, I honestly don't know. Or maybe I'm thinking of a different Jokela from like Chicago or something like that in the last franchise mode that we did in NHL 23. Edmonton should have, I believe, still Jaquezi. Yeah, there's Arthur. This is a pretty big one. Arthur was a 5th-round pick of ours. Very good player for a long time, but he was another player I didn't want to move on from, but I had to. He had 182 points over 2 seasons in Edmonton, so he also was good after leaving us. Didn't make the playoffs actually with that 101-point season. That's actually kind of insane. So Edmonton very much flopped in that department, but Jaquezi, great player for them, still signed for 1 more year. Anybody else that I remember on this team? No. Florida, any former guys? Nobody that I could see here. Like I said, if I pass over anybody, you guys could ask me what their stats are and I could find out. But, yeah, nobody there. Florida, Los Angeles. Well, we're probably going to get into the teams that don't have a lot of guys on our team or used to play with us. That's not the Rafalski that used to play for us. Minnesota. Anybody here? I remember Lapalainen, but he was in Anaheim. I'm trying to see. I don't think anybody was there. Yeah, nobody was here. That's right. Montreal. Any former guys in the Montreal? Oh, Asher Kang. We let this guy go recently. He's not really a huge player for us or anything. Played 5 career games there and then 20 games there. We had to let him go just because frees up a roster spot, basically. 20 points in 82 games with the Habs this year. Minus 33. Eek. So definitely no playoffs for Asher Kang, but shout out to him. Anybody else? I don't know if I looked through every position yet. Oh, there's another one. Dennis Palin, that's where he signed. Was a 1-year deal with the Canadiens. Dennis Palin was kind of an interesting player. Never played in the playoff series other than 4 games since leaving us. He was there for a lot of Stanley Cup wins. Great shutdown defenseman at times. Definitely a little bit of a weird player. was like the first overall selection, I believe, by the Vancouver Canucks. They moved on from him pretty early on. Then he was in Toronto and losing morale quite a bit, so I brought him in very cheaply, and he was with us for a long time. So, and then also with Vegas. But yeah, really interesting player. Like I said, definitely didn't live up to his expectation, but still not bad. Anybody else there? Oh, that's where Jimmy Scarlett is too. So Jimmy Scarlett's playing with him, huh? In Montreal. Played a couple year, or 1 year in Winnipeg, or not in Winnipeg, in Pittsburgh, goddamn, as well. Didn't make the playoffs, of course. Not the best stats, but 22 points might be a career high. Yeah, it is a career high from him. That's crazy. I didn't expect him to have a career year, but yeah, Jimmy Scarlett was with us for quite a couple cup wins as well. That was a bit of a tongue twister. So shout out to him there, at least for 4 to 5 Stanley Cups. Nobody else there. Goalies, Philip Bergquist is there too. Or Per Bergquist, not Philip. I don't know why I said Philip. But shout out to Per Bergquist. He won a Vezina after leaving us the first season in Montreal. Second season didn't do as good for sure. He was a tough one to move on from him, but at the same time, it kind of made sense with their goalie prospects. Yeah, didn't have the best time in the playoffs when he was in there last, but solid goalie, only 28 years old, so he could still end up being a good goalie with the rest of his career. We head to Nashville. Anybody there? Trying to see if I remember anybody. So far, there's been a good chunk of players that used to play with us, so which is kind of cool. Oh, Daniel Lannon. Wait, no, is that our guy? No, that's Dwayne Lannon. Daniel Lannon's the other guy. That might be in the AHL at the moment. I remember him being a center. So, New Jersey. Anybody here that I remember that used to play on the roster? That's a different... actually, is that the right Lannon? No, Daniel Lannon's not the former guy that played for us, right? Oh, it might have been the other Lannon. Let me go back actually to the other team here quickly. Yeah, this is the guy that used to play for us. Because I forgot we acquired him from Anaheim. So, yeah, he played a good amount with us as well. Also played in Winnipeg, Ottawa, or not in Winnipeg, in New York, Ottawa, and Nashville. Jeez, I could barely talk. But he had some okay seasons, but definitely not as good as he could have had. Because he was a first-round pick, pretty high up too, so definitely didn't live up to the expectations. That's kind of funny that both these teams have a Lannon, and both of them are drafted by the Ducks, so like that kind of confused me. Anybody else that I remember? Mangone? No. Jordan Goddard, of course. $16.89 million of Jordan Goddard after leaving us. He's basically the reason why we have that franchise power forward, because we traded away him for an unprotected first. We ended up winning a draft lottery and getting that guy. It's insane. So Jordan Goddard's been good with the Devils in terms of offense, but obviously the Devils had to give up a franchise player basically in order to get Jordan Goddard. Didn't do too much in the playoffs last year, so eek, that's not great for him. But yeah, he's getting paid the big bucks in New Jersey. Anybody else? No. Islanders. Yeah, this is going to be definitely a long video, and I apologize about that, but at least you guys will get to see a nice little wrap-up of everything around the league and all that. I might not take a look at the records on the other teams, just because that might add too much time to this. I might just look at, like, the NHL records in our record book, just to make this video not, like, 2 hours long. Because it's already closing in on, like, an hour in a way. Don't see anybody there. Don't think I see anybody there. Gabriel Dag, well, that's technically a former player. He was drafted by the Chicago Blackhawks. We acquired him quite early on into his career as well. But he had a long time with the New York Rangers. Also briefly played with the New Jersey Devils. I believe he's won a couple Vezinas after leaving us. But yeah, he was a useful goalie. Won us the Stanley Cup, I think, at least 1 or 2 seasons. Had some really solid regular season numbers like this .915 save percentage. Playoffs, I don't remember. Let's see. Yeah, I think he won 1 to 2 Stanley Cups with us. Maybe only 1. But yeah, this is the only one I think that he did win with us. As you can see, 16 wins. And .931 save percentage in a cup run is fantastic. So he was huge for us at certain times, but other times not so much. And then we had to move on from him like we did a lot with our goaltenders. So that is it for the Rangers. Ottawa, another goalie that used to play with us, Stanley King, who I believe was the predecessor to Gabriel Dag, the one that came afterwards. I mean, since leaving us, some 900 save percentage. Played a little bit in Carolina as well. Not too bad, but not the best goalie on paper. And then in the playoffs, he was also there for a Stanley Cup win, I think, in that 2035 season, because I think somebody else got the win there that gave us a cup win as well. He had a 926 save percentage that cup run too, which was the best of his career. So, yeah, we definitely had a bunch of different goalies win a Stanley Cups, but it's good to see that some of them had careers still after the fact. There is Connor Vernarski, former 7th overall pick. He's kind of a little bit of a legend in a way because he had some pretty big plays in overtime. So, shout out to Vernarski. 38 points this year in Ottawa. That's pretty nice. Also played a little bit in Toronto as well before they dealt him to Ottawa. And then, yeah, he played for us. So he's only played for Canadian teams, which is kind of neat. And then in the playoffs, didn't do anything this year in 7 games. 15 points the year that I think Ottawa might have lost in the Cup Finals or won the Stanley Cup. So he was actually pretty good there. Also won some cups with us, of course. But yeah, Vernarski, really solid playoff numbers. And in regular season, pretty solid numbers. Like, I definitely think he stepped it up in the postseason when he played with us. So shout out to Vernarski. Anybody else in Ottawa? Did I remember? No. Okay. Philadelphia. Shout out to this Koi Visto guy, though. Shout out to this guy. He had a friggin' crazy season one year. 85 goals. Since then, has not been able to pick up the same pace, but like fell off to 37 one year, which is kind of insane. But he's still a great player, this dude. But he has not been able to get it done in the postseason yet. Let's see. Anybody else in Philly that's interesting to look at? Nobody there. Nobody there. Defense. Don't see anybody. Goalies. Nope. We head to Pittsburgh. There's a lot of LeBlonds, it seems like, in the league right now. Oh, the franchise defenseman, Denis. Looks like he didn't really pan out to being a great defenseman, to be honest. Actually, some okay seasons, but tons of penalty minutes from this dude. 1,700 penalty minutes in 820 games. Yeah, this guy's an aggressive machine. Jeez. I don't think I've seen a guy with that much PMs in his career. Anybody else that I recognize? Oh, yeah, wait. We were looking into potentially bringing in Chance Carter, but he was with San Jose for a while. He could have been an interesting ad, but we didn't end up doing that. Anybody here in the Pittsburgh? No. We head to San Jose, who's been, I think, a pretty bad team, if I'm not mistaken, in the series. Anybody that I remember? Not that I know of. Nope. Defensively, Raffle, we know who he is, but he's not important. DeVries was with Anaheim at one point, right? Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, we head to Seattle. Rodney, I remember you. Yeah, probably from Philadelphia. What about defense? Any former guys? No. Right wingers? No. Yeah, I think we're at the stage where there's not going to be as much, but we definitely saw a lot of players that used to play on our team, which is pretty sick. St. Louis has been an intriguing team as well. We know a lot of these guys like Peyton Eckford. He's been a really good player in the series, but he hasn't been able to get it done really in the postseason. So, shout out to the Blues, though. Gave us some good runs near the end. Built up a pretty good roster as well. But yeah, I don't think I know too much of these guys, if I'm not mistaken, yeah. Oh, there was roll-off on defense. I guess he was not playing in the playoffs? Oh, they had to send him down to the AHL? See, that's another thing that's kind of dumb. Another player that gets sent down to the AHL after he gets traded there. That's why we didn't see him in the postseason. Wow, okay. And then there's their goaltending. Tampa, anybody here? Not that I see on defense. Nope. Tampa's been a bit of a bad team the last few years, too. Toronto. Anybody in Toronto? Not that I see so far. Caden Wilson. That's another pretty big one that I almost forgot about. Caden Wilson's been a great player since leaving us. I mean, not as good as this 106-point season he had one year with us, but 69 points, 74 points, 76 points, 68 points in 65 games, and he got injured, I guess. Really solid playoff numbers in his career, too. Like, Caden Wilson was probably one of the best players we had on our team in terms of postseason stats. Very helpful in our cup wins, but after leaving us, didn't really get as much playoffs in Toronto as he did with us. So shout out to him, making $10 million bucks. I think we got to go to defense next, right? Yeah. Boom and boom. Okay. We head to Vancouver. Almost there, and then we can finally look at the record book. I know we're almost like an hour into this video, which is kind of crazy. Wait. Cox? I remember Cox from somewhere, but not sure where. That might have been my Chicago series. I was thinking of those guys. Lassie Rantanen. I mean, this guy's not huge, but still, I do remember him, of course. Played a bit in Colorado, Tampa, Minnesota, Nashville, and now is in Vancouver. So he's been moved around quite a bit after his time in Chicago. So shout out to Lassie. Nobody else there. Right wingers, nobody there. Nobody on left wing side of things. Actually, there is, I guess, technically. Actually, no, that's not the right color. The other color must be in the AHL, the one we flipped away. Nobody at center. Okay. Vegas. Don't see anybody there. Left wingers, no. No. Defense. This Nylander guy's starting to become a pretty good defenseman, but nobody that I really know too well. 99 points one year. Not so much points in the postseason. It was only 3 assists in 17 playoff games. Yikes. Yikes, yikes, yikes. Goalies, nope. Washington, it's just the last team. I don't know if there'll be anybody here. This team just won the Stanley Cup recently, right? If I'm not mistaken. Didn't they? Yeah, I think they did. I honestly have no idea. I do remember this dude. Okay, that's kind of weird. I was thinking I seen this guy in the AHL before for our team, but he actually developed into being something. And he was also never signed by us. Washington gave him a chance right out of the gate to play in the AHL, played some NHL time. 42 points last year. That's rather impressive. 19 points in the 24 playoff games to win them the cup. I didn't even realize that when I looked at the roster. Wow. So shout out to Alexander Kulikov. This guy's actually not bad. As a guy that was drafted by us, but we never played him. Wow. And then centers, anybody here? No. So that's everybody in the league. Now the question is, what is this record book looking like? We'll take a look at the NHL record book first. And we aren't going to look at every individual team just because it's going to probably take way too long at this point because I am getting close to an hour of recording this. So might as well just take a look at our own team's record book after that point. So we'll first go to NHL here and take a look at all these records, see if there was anything crazy. Kopitar is now up there in games played, 4th behind Gordie Howe, Joe Thornton, and Patrick Marleau. For goalies, Jesper Wallsted's number 2, Jake Ottinger's number 3, Vasilevsky's number 4. Most goals, Ovechkin still number 1. That's kind of surprising. Matthews number 2, Pasternak number 3, Gretzky's now down to 4, and Connor McDavid at number 5. Kind of surprised McDavid didn't pass Gretzky, and kind of surprised that Ovechkin's still number 1. Points, obviously Gretzky's still number 1, but Austin Matthews also broke 2,000 points. Same with Connor McDavid, but Matthews is number 2, McDavid is number 3. Crosby will be number 4, and Ovechkin number 5. Assists, wow. Cale Makar's number 2 in all-time assists. That's pretty cool. With 1,258. And Crosby would be number 4th, and Malkin number 5. Malkin and Crosby both tied in assists. Okay. In terms of goalie wins, the only change really here is Stuart Skinner's jumped to number 4. Gabriel Dagg, our former goaltender, jumped to number 5. That's actually pretty cool. So shout out to Gabriel Dagg. Shutouts, nobody up there really. Marc-Andre Fleury finished number 5 with 83. Most 50-goal seasons, this is an interesting one. Aiden Irving didn't have a lot of 50-goal seasons, so unfortunately he won't be on this. But Alex Ovechkin finished with the most of 14. Yanni Koivisto, that's the one that's on the Ducks. So the other Koivisto had 10 50-goal seasons. Mike Bossy is still there, Gretzky there, and Matthews at number 5 with 9. Most 100-point seasons, Gretzky, then McDavid with 14. So McDavid almost had as much as Gretzky. Then you had Draisaitl, Lemieux, and Matthews. So there is that. In terms of season records, anything get broken? Pekka Koivisto had the most goals in NHL history in a season since Wayne Gretzky in 1980. Or actually, I guess you could say since Mario Lemieux in 87. But he had 85 goals, which is 5th place, or 4th, tied for 4th, all-time for goals in a year. So that's a pretty big one from Pekka Koivisto. No assists broken, no points getting broken. Shutouts, nobody's breaking that either. Wins, Gabriel Deg, most in a season in 2040 was number 2. So that was not with us. Per Berkvist, though, that 2036 record, I believe, is with our team. 50 wins in a season. So that's pretty neat. So 2 former goalies up there. Rookie records, anything get broken here? Earl Ferrario, 58 goals, was the second most amount of goals in a rookie season. So that's cool. I don't think I even heard of this guy in this franchise mode really that much, but that was only 13 seasons ago. So shout out to Earl. Anything else in terms of rookie stats get broken here? Stanley King up there and wins in 2033. That would have been with us likely because it was rookie record. So shout out to Stanley King. Shutouts, nobody up there, and that's it for NHL records. Now, let's take a look at our own records. We'll start off by probably looking at game records. Yeah, game-by-game records, just because I think this will be cooler to look at the game records first. So, I would assume Aiden Irving had most goals in a game, but honestly, it could be somebody like Groshek, and I wouldn't be surprised. So, most saves, that's still Milan Hlinikov, the former Atlanta Thrashers. Obviously, the Atlanta Thrashers allowed a lot of shots. We didn't as much. Most assists in a game, Kurt Goldman. I didn't even see him on any team. I got to find out where he is, because I honestly think he's still playing. But Kurt Goldman had the most assists in a game. That's actually really impressive. I didn't expect that. 6 assists. Most points in a game was Chaz Lucius with 6, though. So Chaz Lucius is long retired, I think, at this point, but he was a pretty big piece to his team. I believe he won a Conn Smythe one year in one of our cup wins. And Patrick Laine still has the Winnipeg Jets record for most goals in a game. So I guess Aiden Irving might have had 5 goals in a game, but he never broke 5 goals in a game. All right. Rookie records. Michael Misa had the most assists in a season in a rookie year, which was 2026 with 55. Most shutouts was Logan Scarlett in a rookie year with 5. Brian Marsh had the most goals in a rookie season with 45 because he beat out Aiden Irving. Stanley King, the most wins in a season with 41. And the most points in a rookie season, 85 from Ludwig Eckel. All right. Season records. This should be cool. So most games played, obviously, still it's basically whoever played 82 games first. It doesn't really matter. So it just says Chris Thorburn still. Most shutouts in a season is 7 from Per Berkvist. Not a surprise. Most penalty minutes by a guy is Jeff Odgers when he was with the Atlanta Thrashers. Of course, that makes sense that that's not going to be broken because Jeff Odgers was an enforcer. Aiden Irving, most goals in the season in 2034 with the 59-goal season he had. I would expect Brian Marsh to get close to that at some point. Most points in the season was Michael Misa with 117. That's crazy. So we had probably like 3 different Conn Smythe winners, or not Conn Smythe winners, Art Ross winners in the series. Like I think Misa, Enroth, and I believe Aiden Irving had one as well. There's probably some other players, maybe 2, but Michael Misa the most points in the season. He also had the most assists with 94. Most of those setting up probably Aiden Irving and such like that. Per Berkvist, most wins in a year in 2036 with 50, as we saw. And then career records. This should be interesting. Most career points, Aiden Irving, 1,330. Next closest right now is Will Vandermeer with 837. Not a surprise. Most seasons played with us, Aiden Irving with 17 seasons. Vandermeer's on 14 seasons at the moment. Most career assists with the Winnipeg Jets, Will Vandermeer with 689. And obviously that's still the current leader. Most games played, Aiden Irving with 1,327. He had a lot of injury-prone seasons, so I think his games played could easily get broken. Will Vandermeer had 1,145 at this point in time, so he probably would have been able to lead the team eventually. Thorburn still most penalty minutes in a career with 832. Obviously, that's not going to be broken too easily, but the next closest is Bjorn Backer of our team with 498 at the moment, so he's close to 500 PIMs. Most shutouts in a career, Connor Hellebuck with 42. We moved him pretty early, so it makes sense with the amount of goalies we changed through that we weren't going to break that. Same with the amount of goalie wins, which is also Hellebuck with 329. And lastly, the goal record, of course, Aiden Irving with 743. The next closest is Ludwig Ekholm with 200. So Aiden Irving, by far the best player in this series, and he will definitely be a Channel Hall of Fame inductee if I ever decide to actually make a Channel Hall of Fame video. But anyways, guys, that is going to do it officially for the Winnipeg Jets franchise mode here in NHL 24. So I hope you guys enjoyed this series. It was probably one of my favorite series I've done in a while just because I won a ton of cups and all that, tons of hardware. Had some really fun players as well. It does suck that the series is coming to an end, but I'm looking forward to doing some NHL 25 content relatively soon. So let me know who I should be doing for my first NHL 25 franchise mode, like my regular franchise mode. Like I said, I have a straw poll in the description, so you guys can go vote on that and see who we do for our first series, which should be an exciting one regardless of what team we do. And yeah, let me know what you think down below, and I'll see you guys next time.